Okay, we're at time here, and then I see we have a number of people joined already, and others are filtering in, so we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm Michael Bagel, Program Manager of Greening Healthcare, and this is the Energy Efficiency Ranking of Ontario's Hospitals. Today, we're going to be presenting the top 10 lists of acute and continuing care hospitals from publicly reported data that all hospitals are required to report on July 1st of every year. With this being the most recently posted data of 2020. It's going to be followed by a panel with 3 panelists with a discussion of what needs to be done to get the rest of these 250 buildings up to the levels of the top 10 lists. And this isn't going to be a technical discussion. We have a number of resources on the site and recordings from past events if you want to check those out. This is going to be more of a discussion on organizationally or through management, like what do we have to kind of change throughout the sector to have everyone be a part of a top 10 list, a top 10 tie. Recording today, and this will be available from the site within the next week. Please use the Q&A option if you have any questions. We are partnered with CHES, the Canadian Healthcare Engineering Society. And thank you to our growing group of sponsors here. This is Belimo, Ellis Don, Enbridge Gas, ENS, QMC, Save On Energy, Smith & Anderson, and Thermogenic Boilers. EnerLife provides the technical direction of the program, and it is run under the nonprofit organization of the Climate Challenge Network. And I'll pass it on to Ian Jarvis, the Executive Director of the Climate Challenge Network, to get started.
Thank you, Michael. And good morning to everyone who's joining us from the West. As you know, this is looking at the rankings of Ontario's hospitals, but I believe and hope you'll find useful content here that you can relate to situations in Western provinces and in the United States. So good morning to the West, good early afternoon to everybody else from Ontario, and thanks for the introduction, Michael. And if we may get started, the every Climate Challenge Network event begins with a land acknowledgement, and we do respectfully acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, the Métis, and the First Nations people that share these lands with us. We're broadcasting today from Toronto, which are the traditional lands of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And as many of you will be aware, Toronto and Vaughan, this block, this Toronto and stretching north, is the subject of Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the New Credit, which was otherwise known as the Toronto Purchase Treaty back in 1805. But we take very seriously our responsibility, our shared responsibility with our Indigenous friends and neighbors, and hopefully the work that we do will be a fitting response to the responsibility we share to take good care of this planet. So thanks to our event sponsor, Ellis Don Facility Services, not just for this event, but for all the support that you provide in allowing Climate Challenge Network and Greening Healthcare to do the work that it does. And let's talk about our plan for the day. Mostly today, I think it's fair to say that most of the events up until 2022 that Greening Healthcare has conducted has been all about sharing metrics, sharing best practices, sharing information, networking with a view to everybody having the opportunity to move forward with respect to energy efficiency of their facilities and greenhouse gas emissions related to their facilities. As we set the stage for today's conversation, we'd like to impart a bit more of a sense of urgency. The climate change clock is ticking. You see evidence in the news every day, and there's a healthcare leadership role which we want to try to explore with our executive panel coming up later, but also share with you in terms of information, ideas, thoughts. But as we run through recognition of the top performing hospitals as we talk about planning in Ontario, as Michael said. By July the 1st of next year, 2024, all Ontario hospitals have to file with the Ministry of Energy their energy conservation demand management plans. We think those plans are going to look a little different this year and be very much focused on taking action now. We need to move forward. And again, after the panel discussion, we'll close today's event with a bit of a call to action, this emergency around dealing with climate response. And every hospital in Canada, every hospital in North America has both the opportunity and we would suggest a responsibility to take the action that we can all take to make material significant improvements in emissions. That's our plan for the day. Setting the stage, want to talk a bit about how are we doing? Again, I think everybody today is very aware that there's a bit of a climate crisis developing. We see the fires in the west, we see the floods in the east, we see the heat waves in Europe and in the southern United States. Things are not going well. The blue line that you're seeing here is Canada's plan for greenhouse gas emissions related to buildings. So this is Canada's buildings plan. And that plan looks for a baseline of 2019, a 41% reduction in emissions by 2030. By a couple of years from now, we should be down by 20%. Our reality in Ontario is the dotted line you see there. That is natural gas growth associated with buildings since 2019. So we should be going down towards a 41% reduction by 2030. In fact, we're going up by 1% a year. This is highly problematic, and we're going to see increasing government attention, government action, looking to response to this to get us back on the right curve. We are satisfied with the science that says if we don't get to our 2030 target, we won't get to our 2050 target. And if we don't get to our 2050 target, we're in trouble. So this is all about closing that gap. In Ontario, we have a number of interesting things happen. The idea of seizing the moment. So Enbridge Gas's DSM program, the Ontario Energy Board only gave them 3 years, not 5 years this time. So we have a plan that goes from 2023 to 2025, and there's some innovations and interesting programming in there. The dotted line that goes to 2030, you can expect the 2026 plan to look a lot different, to have more aggressive targets, to have much more substantive support available. So that's coming. The IESO, its CDM plan, its Conservation Demand Management Plan, is 2021 to 2024. In 2025, they're bringing out their new targets, their new goals. And as mentioned already, the Energy Conservation Demand Management Plans start in 2024. They go to 2029, which essentially takes us up to 2030. So the proposition we're offering to everybody in Ontario today and for consideration by other parts of North America is these plans matter. Whereas perhaps in prior years, the plans have been check the box. I don't want the Ministry of Energy dropping a note to my CEO saying, where's your plan? This year, we need to be planning for action. We need to be planning for material reductions. This is kind of the opportunity. This is seizing the moment. This is the responsibility. So let's talk about leadership within the healthcare sector, because over the last couple of years, we've had Dr. Ballem and Dr. Cohn, Barbara Collins, the president and CEO of Humber River Hospital, sharing the fact that this really matters in the C-suite. This matters to the CEOs, it matters to the boards of directors for different reasons, not just for saving money, not just for addressing climate change. Dr. Cohn spoke so eloquently about the connection between climate change and public health. The boardrooms care. Meanwhile, we're very conscious that the people actually running the facilities, you folks, you're just coming out of COVID, short of resources. So on top of everything else that's on your plate, how and where do we find the time and resources to pay attention and serious attention and commit the time to looking at effective energy efficiency action, effective emissions reduction action. And that is the huge challenge. That's what we're hoping to explore today in the context of some hospitals already doing really well. As Michael said, the goal is now how do we get everybody else to that position? We have an exceptional panel to address that. We'll come to them in just a moment. But we're looking to make clear that the stage is set, action is needed. It's relatively urgent. Healthcare sector has a major role to play. There is a commitment from the sector to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And it requires all of us to work together to figure out how to make that happen, given all the other demands on your time. So let's get to the happy space. It's always good news. We learn most of what we learn by studying top performing hospitals. And as you know, Michael is voracious in scouring North America and other parts of the world to find the most energy efficient hospitals. And then we want to look at them and see what is there that we want to share. Today, we're going to report on Ontario's top performing hospitals based on analysis of the publicly reported data, which all hospitals are required to submit. So top performing hospitals. First, the methodology, then the drum roll. So the methodology is summarized in the white paper. Our white paper is up on the Greening Healthcare website. It's a very transparent methodology. In simple terms, it's based on if all the hospitals having made adjustments for material differences, weather being one, the few hospitals with combined heat and power plants being another, but making the adjustments for major material variables, if we can get all the hospitals to the top quartile, not the bleeding edge, not the leading edge, not the best they can be, not major reconstruction, not a ton of renewable energy, just get them running facilities as efficiently as we already know how to do it, which we learn from these top performing hospitals. If we can get to that top quartile, we take a major bite. We'll show you the quantity in a moment. We take a major bite out of the emissions associated with healthcare facilities. So the methodology is there. We really encourage people, take a look. If there's anything you disagree with, if anything you're not sure, we're always happy to hear from you. We update the document fairly regularly. As you can see, the latest is July 2023. But this explains the methodology. And now the drum roll, if we could. We've broken the recognition. We were thinking about the top 20, but then we found that really there are three fairly distinct groups of hospitals within our very large database. There's the big city hospitals. There are the smaller regional acute and smaller city acute care hospitals, and the continuing care facilities. So this group, and thanks to them and congratulations to them, and be sure Michael's going to be knocking on your door because we want to know more about you that we can share with everybody else. This is our group of the top 10 hospitals as large city-based acute care, often teaching hospitals. So this includes Greening Healthcare members, hospitals that are not Greening Healthcare members. It's the whole group, but these are the 10 that bubble to the top of the benchmark charts. And you can see on the right-hand side, there is the benchmark. There are the individual top quartile, top decile levels. The top performing hospitals are working towards top decile levels, and the ones who are already at the top decile level are working at incremental improvement from now, because everybody has further improvements they can make. We learn from that. For us, it's this emissions intensity number in the right-hand column, which is key. Like, we know we can run full-blown, full-blooded hospitals for 3 or less kilograms per square foot. And you can see even the 8, 9, and 10 hospitals here are using more than double that amount. We got lots of room to go, even with top performers, and everybody else has got a way to go from that. The smaller facilities, and here we're going from 100,000 to 500,000 square feet. That's the size range we're looking at. Congratulations to Niagara Health. 2 of their older facilities are here. And again, I want to flag for everybody, each of these lists has brand new facilities with the best of technology and not the, if you like, the disadvantage of deterioration of plant and equipment over time, and also has older facilities that have just learned how to run it right. So this group here, again, another drum roll, congratulations to this group for the progress they're making in, again, the smaller acute care facilities. And again, these are the group we learn from. And our third group and final group, our other 10, here are our continuing care facilities. So Providence Manor in Kingston, part of Providence Care. Peel Memorial Hospital, we profiled on 2 or 3 occasions. The Peel Memorial and Waypoint Center, both featuring geothermal. And we've been exploring and will continue to explore geothermal installations to see what they can contribute. You can see just how good their emissions numbers are. And these reference points, we'll come back to this, but every hospital on this call, if you're in Ontario, you're on these charts. If you're outside of Ontario, we can readily plug you into these charts. We can adjust for the weather differences. All of these start with not, we got a problem with the climate, the government should do something. This whole premise today starts with every hospital is located on these charts. Every hospital needs to know where you stand, and every hospital needs to have an action plan for making the improvements that you can make. Again, this is our opportunity to tell our children and our grandchildren we made a serious contribution to climate change. We can quantify that contribution, we can make it happen, and we need to make sure we put the resources in place to make it so. This is a big deal for Ontario. If we, again, without particularly aggressive targets, simply getting all the hospitals in the province to the top quartile level, making them all good, gets a 30% reduction in thermal energy use, a 15% reduction in electricity consumption. It drives, you can add those 2 numbers, $75 million a year of utility cost savings, and it takes out 187,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. Check the numbers on the kinds of programming out there. That is a very big number. It's readily attainable. Like, we know how to do it. We just got to make it happen. So from a provincial standpoint, this is a big deal. And Ontario has been a leader in this space and looks to continue to be a leader in this space. It's down to us together to make this happen. The final piece I want to do on the numbers, because now that we have public reporting, we can look for year to year at are we actually making progress. So we filtered out quite a lot of facilities based on data anomalies, and I kind of offer a reminder to everybody doing this public reporting, it matters that we get the data right. So we filtered out quite a few, but ending up with 159 hospitals, we drive these tornado diagrams. So these are all about 2020 energy use compared to 2019, having adjusted for weather changes between the 2 years. The middle chart is electricity. You can see there are hospitals there that made up to, from 1 year to the next, saved 20%, 30% of their electricity consumption. The overall group within there, like the top half of that tornado diagram, saved about 10% of their overall electricity consumption. What's killing us is the hospitals at the bottom, the ones that actually the electricity use went up, which more than offset all the savings at the top. So once again, every hospital from Ontario that's looking at this, you're on this chart. You belong in there. If you don't know if you're in the top section or the bottom section, you need to. And after this webinar, please give Michael a call, because this really matters. And the ones in the bottom of the chart, if we can just get them to stay stable, we have an order of magnitude bigger year-on-year progress. Looking at the chart on the right, this one's even more important, because in Ontario, natural gas is where all the greenhouse gas emissions are, or most of them are. Exactly the same picture. Here we've got significant savings from a large group of hospitals in the top half of the chart, offset almost entirely by the group at the bottom. So we wind up with a net 0.1% increase in electricity, a net 0.1% reduction in natural gas. And it doesn't take a rocket science to figure out we can't get there from here this way. This just does not work. So the need to address our energy use, to know where we stand on the benchmark, know where we stand in terms of savings, is profoundly important. We have the data. We're happy to share it with everybody. It is the starting point of your plan towards making improvements. So we have lots of room to improve. And right now, as of 2020 versus 2019, we're not going in the right direction. Let's talk about planning, and then we want to head right into the panel. So once again, in Ontario, every 5 years, every Ontario hospital, municipality, college, university, school board, all of them have to prepare and post energy conservation plans. I'm going to make probably a judgmental comment, which I shouldn't, but a lot of the plans in 2014 and 2019 ended up being check the box. Here's what we could do if we had time and we had resources and we had money, but we don't. And so very little got done. And in fact, we haven't made progress. Speaking to the IESO, the hospital sector of all the public sector groups in Ontario has made the least progress with respect to energy efficiency improvements over the past 5 years. That is a total contrast to the commitments we hear from CEOs, to the expectations we're increasingly hearing from boards of directors. So we're going in the wrong direction. We've got progress to make. Our ECDM plans, we would argue, in 2024 have to be very serious about what can we do, and we'll provide some counsel here, whether you prefer the plans yourselves, whether you hire a consultant to do it, what needs to be in those plans to make them effective, to make them action-oriented, and to deliver significant improvements over the next 5 years. So start with what is required and what belongs in every plan, the 5-year trends. Like I don't have to tell any of you, it's been an interesting 5 years. We've gone through the whole pandemic. During that period, you need to know if your energy use went up or down. If you're a Greening Healthcare member, contact Michael. We can show you exactly. You can go online on the Greening Healthcare website and look back 5 years on your baseline and see how, if and how you've improved over that period. You need to know that, and whether it went up and down, what caused the savings or the increases, and more importantly, what are the lessons learned? Like over the last 5 years, what have you learned that can make your next plan more effective? The other key issue is the pandemic. The pandemic was horrible, was frightening, was global, but we learned a lot about resilience. We learned about what it was about our operations and our building systems that enabled us to respond effectively or struggle to respond to the pandemic. So these bullets here are things that are must-haves in your plan. Scheduling really matters, and schedules need to reflect new requirements associated with COVID. Your building automation system, your variable frequency drives, testing and rebalancing air handling system. All of these things are the pieces that were connected with the hospitals that we saw through the data did best through the pandemic. These are the things we would suggest. And again, this recording will be up, so you don't need to write all this down. This recording will be up after the webinar, and you can refer back to it. But again, whoever puts your plan together, I suggest get on with it sooner rather than later, and make sure you address these things. In particular, address what do we learn from the last 5 years that can help us be more effective in the coming 5 years. Even if you're not a Greening Healthcare member, we're happy to give you your rational energy target for Greening Healthcare. So we've read a lot of plans from 2014 and 2019, where hospitals will cautiously say, we're going to try to improve by 1% a year over the next 5 years. or by 10% over whatever that is, not good enough. This will not kind of cut the mustard for what needs to be accomplished. You'll see the chart on the left-hand side there, which has brand new hospitals, which are the new P3 hospitals, which are shaded in the dark, and all the other hospitals there. This is savings potential. This is how much energy you can save, and by extension, how much emissions you can save by getting to that top quartile standard. Every hospital in North America has a greening healthcare number based on this metric. It's a great place for you to start. If anybody prepares your plan and comes up with something a lot less than what that greening healthcare target is, it will not be good enough, and it will become clearer and clearer as we approach 2030 that it's not good enough. The healthcare sector needs to respond to the numbers that are required. We can do so again. It's our collective opportunity, it's our collective responsibility. Know where you stand. If you haven't got your greening healthcare number, contact Michael. We'll get it to you. This is really now setting the stage for our executive panel that's going to be talking about this. And again, I'll touch on this in a moment. The executive panel is leading this conversation. We're going to be looking for questions and comments and thoughts and things that get in the way from everybody on this call today. And Michael will be reviewing those, and he's going to do what he does so well, which is interrupt me on a regular basis saying, we got a really good question here around this one. And we'll pose that to the panel. We'll try to respond to it ourselves. If we get more questions in the Q&A than we're able to respond to today, we will formally respond to them with our panelists after the event. But the two other big ideas we want you to consider around planning for energy efficiency, emissions reduction. First is what to do. We pretty much know that now. There's no shock, there's no surprise. Conservation planning that just has a list of measures and what we think they'll cost and what we estimate they'll save. That's kind of a given. We've done that 2 years, 2 periods in a row already, 2014, 2019. The energy efficiency improvements, if you cover all of these things, that yes, that applies, no, it doesn't, you've got your list of measures. If you look at your target savings, which gives you emissions, energy, and dollar savings, dollars per year, if you want a rough budget, take 5 times your savings number, assume the whole thing is going to have a 5-year payback. And if that gives you $1 million investment, that's a pretty good starting point. The second part is so efficiency improvements are immediate, do now, get on with it. But you're also in real life facilities. Capital planning is ongoing. You've got infrastructure renewal. You've got in Ontario HERF funding, in other jurisdictions, infrastructure renewal funding by other names. These bullet considerations here are, again, if you're replacing air handling equipment and not putting exhaust air heat recovery in, if you're not looking at smaller boiler plants and heat recovery chillers and various forms of electrification, if you're not looking at renewable energy readiness, even if you haven't got funding to install renewable energy now, make sure the improvements you make to your plant are ready for those kind of replacements in the future. So if on a go-forward basis, you're planning and implementing immediate efficiency improvements that we can help point you towards, and if all of your capital planning is realigned around the low carbon future, so you're not doing like-for-like replacement, you're looking always at the low carbon alternatives, then you've got it right. That's the best you can do right now as policy and programming falls into place. This is the harder part. The energy efficiency opportunities have existed in every hospital across Ontario, across North America for the past decade. The bigger question is what gets in the way? How do we get things done? What do we have to put into place? And we've had just a bunch of conversations with so many of you, and it comes down to these 4 headings. Governance. Have we got the right direction from the top? Have we got real commitment? Have we got people saying that we need to do this, where you're saying, I'm willing to put the time in, but I need support from the top. So governance really matters. We want to explore this a bit more. we always hear time, resources, and money. So the idea that we can't afford to save $75 million a year to us, that doesn't compute. That doesn't work. So that's not really the reason. It comes down to more commitment, putting the right resources in place, making sure we've got the right people in the right place. And we're going to come back to procurement in a moment because it's such a big issue. And we're going to ask our panel to talk about this, and we'll welcome your thoughts. Organizational alignment is a big deal. Who's responsible? If we're looking to schedule air handling systems, which is the biggest single measure which is driving savings in those hospitals that are making improvement. We're looking at scheduling air handling systems. Who's responsible? If a department pushes back saying, no, I've always had air conditioning on Sunday, and twice a year I come in, I expect it to be there. Like, how does that work? How is that going to get resolved? Who has the accountabilities? What are the KPIs? The most efficient hospitals, we're seeing key performance indicators related to this stuff built into senior managers' requirements, job requirements, engagement of clinical staff. We're starting to see clinical staff actually pushing us to make progress, to move things forward. And does your staff have the right training, the right knowledge? Are you keeping the organization informed? Organizational alignment, in our view, may be the single biggest issue and needs more than just the facilities department pushing. And finally, it gets us into knowledge. Once we're all organized and we want to do this, and do we know what to do? Do we know how to do it? Do we have the right kind of standards? Do we have service contractors that are in tune with what it is that we're trying to do? So they're not just coming to service our boilers, they're coming to tell us how to make them run more efficiently. Are our building automation providers in tune with what we're trying to do? Are they looking to work with us to improve efficiency, not just to keep the equipment running? So these for us are the big headings. This is the hard piece. And we'd suggest that the majority of the effort that goes into your planning be focused not on what to do, which is relatively straightforward, but how are you going to get it done, with these being a useful starting point for your headings. So, Michael, are there any kind of protests or questions or comments that have emerged so far before we turn to the panel?
No, nothing yet.
Good. So, as I always do, kind of immense credit and thanks to our panelists. For me, this is a dream panel in terms of executive hospital presence and a major provider of facility services in hospitals where we know that Ellis-Don is absolutely committed to getting it right, to being in the right part of the benchmark chart with every facility that they're involved with. So I think, you know these names, you know these faces. So Cliff, we asked to be part of this with his background within government, his background within operational side of hospitals, and his direct involvement in new hospitals, because all of these are part of the puzzle. Andrew Blair, you know well now at Bakерest, but with so much experience going back through different hospitals, again, involved with new facilities as well as existing, involved with a massive redevelopment at Mount Sinai Hospital. And Andrew, I think when people talk to me about Andrew, they talk about he's the guy who figured out how to get things done sometimes despite the system. So we love people who get things done. So Andrew, welcome to this. And once again, Colin, we're just really impressed with the commitment Ellis-Don has made to making all of this work, and looking forward to the insights that you're going to provide to us about from the people running these hospitals all across the country of all kinds of different types, trying to work with all kinds of different hospital organizations. What does that look like? So welcome, panel. Again, thank you for your time and effort going into this. Cliff, I'm going to, as I so often do, start with you, and I want to start with governance. And all the experience you've had on the government side of things, within the hospital side of things, within an individual hospital. What for you is best practice around governance? What kind of leadership, what kind of direction, what kind of messaging should come to the top to make all of this come together?
Thanks, Ian, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to everyone today. Governance is huge. I have to say, often we think of an afterthought, and when we start talking about energy projects, traditionally in the past, discussions around mechanical, electrical systems came out of a process where the consultants came in and kind of gave you direction on what you're going to build, best practices always, and moving forward. But setting goals and targets is not necessarily the responsibility of a consultant coming in. That's where the organization would stand up and actually make it part of the overall governance model. And so one thing that we did at Niagara Health before we engaged in the design process was actually go out and do a report. We call it the environmental report, for lack of a better term, to actually look at all the things we wanted to achieve in the project and set targets. And by doing that, we were ahead of the curve, because now engaging our consultants, we had clear direction. These reports were accepted by the steering committee. They set our targets and we went forward. And then from a governance point of view, we actually measured and reported on them. And that's the big thing about a governance model, is that if you're not reporting, if you're not following the performance, and I have to say that to me is one of the key things that Greening Healthcare does in terms of what you just did today. You can measure yourself, you can look at the performance, you can actually measure against, you can look at benchmarking. I would argue it goes to the last note there on knowledge and sharing of knowledge. But for me, governance is big. Setting our targets early, achieving those, and having leadership buy-in, absolutely huge. And I'll argue one last thing, and I'll put in the chat the link to our environmental report, which was done in 2019. I will actually, next time I do it, I will now move the needle further along, because while we set targets, I have to say, we have to start responding to other targets that are set for us. And that was your point. If we don't do it, somebody will, from that perspective. I'll stop there. I have other comments about resourcing and everything else, but I could go on forever, as you know, so I'll stop.
Love the thought on lessons learned, and I'm actually going to come back to you on a different lens on governance as well in just a moment, Cliff. But yeah, Andrew, let's move on to you, and it won't be a great surprise to say, I want to get your thoughts on organizational alignment. You've been involved in a number of organizations. You're in a brand new one right now. What have you learned about getting the whole organization working on this as a collective hospital responsibility?
So, well, thank you, everybody, for giving me the chance and the platform to speak. Most who know me know I do have a passion for this. I drag it from one hospital to another, and had the opportunity to work with both Cliff and Colin now, and they've both heard that passion. And Ian, we've been working together for years. But key to any of moving the needle on hospitals and how they become more efficient and how they drive these targets is the people, the champions. Every organization needs that driving force to pull both senior leaders, the operational leaders, and then the clinical teams to a common mission. It all works together when you can get them all to a committee that has a common mission and mandate. And it's a bonus if you can drive that right up into the strategic team level and make their mandates tangible and scalable, because that usually then influences the senior leaders to put skin in the game, and that skin in the game is usually the capital to influence that change. So when organizations do it right, they have that free-flowing way of having the champion drive business cases back to the leaders who can make decisions, and then the senior team, because there are mandates at that level to to showcase how their performance will move, start to move projects. Of course, the current state is not as seamless as that. It takes time. And so in the short period of time that I've been here, and I've only been here since March, I've started the dialogues with, right at the top. You got to start at the top, so the CEO level, and I've got good dialogues going with the CEO. We have the fortune of moving through our strat plan this year. So, my hope, I cross my fingers, we'll get something influential in our strategic plan, our 5-year outlook, that helps me help everybody in the organization move those targets. Because again, without that lever, it can be lost in the translation of all the other priorities of the organization. And we all know saving dollars and energies puts money back into the clinical realm of operations. There's benefits to everybody one way or the other, but if there's nothing tangible, it doesn't move. So my hope, my goal, my mission right now in the next 3 to 4 months while we finish off our strat plan is to make sure we have some language and some targets, so that we have a great opportunity in the next 5 years of moving our targets and our milestones from where we are now to where we want to be.
Thanks, Andrew. That's a great opening. And again, it won't be a surprise to you, Colin, that I want to kind of task you with knowledge. So we talked about, does everybody have the knowledge, the training, the information they need to be able to play their part? So once you've got the commitment, everybody's lined up, do they have the knowledge they need? And if not, where do you find that knowledge? Like, how do we move this forward?
Yeah, and I think thank you for inviting me to the panel. Obviously, it's great to be part with Andrew and Cliff. I think we do have the knowledge now, especially in healthcare. With greening healthcare, I think we've talked before, Ian, about you provide a lot of resources, especially for the hospitals that don't have the resources to investigate themselves. And we talk about payback and business cases. Throughout that entire list that you've shown, somebody has done the project that you're looking to do, whether it's rebalancing or whatever, and knows what the cost is generally, knows approximately what the payback is. And so all of that upfront work that is typically a bottleneck has been done, or has been done in a rough way that you can at least get some funding to do some more detailed design. So I think the knowledge is there. We've done you guys have done some great work for our hospital. So full transparency, our hospitals that we run are not in that top 10. They will be in that top 10. We're pushing to that. But we do have comparisons. So we've had that conversation around what's a hospital about the same vintage, what's the delta, what's the difference there, what's the difference in equipment, and where can I get to just with the equipment that I have, or with minimal capital input. So I think that's really important. I want to talk a little bit about governance and something that both Andrew and Cliff said about setting the targets, and that being at an executive level. I think that's critical in healthcare. It's critical within Ellis Don. We have targets internally, both in construction and FM and facilities management. But it's important to drive that down to the front line as well. So and I think you touched on it, Ian, about our subcontractors or the contractors that are coming in and maintaining your equipment. The people that are supervising those contractors need to have those same targets in mind. So they are pushing to do that little bit extra, a little bit change, and not just maintaining equipment, but tweaking. I mean, the graph that you showed, the 2019 to 2020 and 2020, obviously pandemic year, we saw a slippage in some of the hospitals on gas usage and electricity usage. And some of that is just distraction. I mean, FM teams were running full out like everybody else in healthcare. And so how do we get that back? We need to make sure we're making those adjustments to bring them back in line. And that requires frontline supervision and management to be on board with targets, I think.
So a great opening to this. So I've heard 3 big ideas related to governance, organizational alignment, and knowledge. Then I want to put a provocative idea out there, and then we'll look for responses from the audience. And again, I said this in previous webinars and workshops. It's rarely that we get the opportunity to bring these kinds of experience together. Ask your questions today. So think about your questions now. Get them in the Q&A if we can't respond to them immediately. But what I've heard is around governance. Cliff, you're saying it's the hospital's responsibility to set its goals. not to turn it over to consultants and hope that they come up with the right numbers. And I'm reminded of Humber River Hospital. Its journey started with Laurie Pella and as a champion, Andrew, but Laurie Pella setting the goal for the hospital, and a hospital executive that was courageous enough to stay the course, and ended up with changing the game globally. Humber River now is being referenced globally as to where it came in. So your job is the hospital's job to set your goals, and those goals have to be well informed. They have to be in line with where we have to go. Andrew, you refer to champions, and champions that provide the energy, but then bringing it together in a consultative kind of process so the whole hospital's on side. And Colin, I pass your wording to say, networking and collaboration. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn from where others have been before. And in fact, there's no time to reinvent the wheel. If we're going to make real headway by 2030, you can't all be doing it individually. So 3, I think, kind of really profoundly important principles that I hope everybody's thinking about. The idea I'd suggest that if we get governance, organizational alignment, and knowledge right, time, resources, and money take care of themselves. So what we always hear when we talk to hospitals about why can't you get things done? It's always, I got no time. Do you know how many things I'm trying to get done? I can't get money, but there's a business case here. So the argument is, if we get governance, organizational alignment, and knowledge straight, of course we're going to put the right resources in the right place to get the returns that we need to avoid the wrath of the government and to avoid carbon taxes crippling our health service delivery capability. So let me pause at this point. Michael, have we got any questions from the audience?
There's one open question. It's not directly related to the conversation. It's just looking into what are some insights into further financial incentives that could be put into place for electricity and gas savings.
Okay, so stay tuned with the next events coming up with Greening Healthcare, because the IESO and Enbridge, both in terms of current programming and looking forward, will be part of that whole process. Cliff, I want to come back to you on the governance. So we talked about governance within the hospital, and at risk of inviting you to get into trouble, which is, you never need to be invited, going beyond the individual hospitals, where do you feel the government fits within this? The Ministry of Health, Infrastructure Ontario. I know that there are representatives from there involved there. And you've been in government. What advice would you have to, how does the ministry play its role here in supporting, encouraging, enabling, whatever it is they need to do things for? What's the government's role in all of this, Cliff?
It's a really good question, because it's part of, I go with what Colin said, it's part of the team. I mean, they're part of the overall team to get there. I actually, one of the things that when you were talking about time, resources, and money, it doesn't naturally fall in place. You can have the governance and the organizational alignment and the knowledge, but if you don't have the government on side, and that's where a lot of the procurement comes through, you will, I won't say you will fail, but you'll struggle. You will struggle. And part of that is that that resource, time, resource, and money for healthcare comes from, in Ontario, comes from the government. It comes from the Ministry of Health. It may come through a HERF program. It may go through a capital redevelopment project. And the issue is, and I would say this is one of the, go back to governance. When I put a governance model together and I do a report, I should be, and Andrew's, well, when we worked together, was a key champion, but also a key resource for me to do business cases, to make the argument that really there's no better investment for what we're doing here. And I remember the discussions with the CFO. I mean, that was the first line of defense for protecting the budget. And once we sold it through that, we actually set the targets and we moved forward. The CFO on the other side of the equation, be it the Ministry of Health, because IO doesn't have the budget, the Ministry of Health has the budget, having the discussion with them, there is no champion there to say, we have to do this. We need to do this because we have this target. And guess what? This is where I think the big challenge is. what's your target, Ministry of Health? Now they'll go, well, that's the Ministry of Environment. And there's none of this sort of cross-referencing. And I might even got the Ministry of Environment incorrect, who has the target, who's responsible for it. The nice thing is that finding those alignment and finding out the responsibility, you can make a strong argument to government that you should do this. And there is a cost associated with it, but there's also a cost associated with not doing it. And I think of Ronnie Cohen's quote, healthcare isn't supposed to be contributing to the problem. And that's it. The second part of that is Infrastructure Ontario is a great support to this. But again, talking about procurement models, and now they have a group that's extensively building itself out. They're our network, our allies to actually say, yes, this is what you should be doing. And they'll support us when we need to go to the ministry. But for me, I still struggle, and we struggle. The fact is value engineering hits our energy targets, right? And a part of it is that business case. If we don't do this, what are we going to get? And it's like, well, there's nothing to measure on the other side because it's just capital. So you're going to cost X. What are we going to get for it? Well, we're going to get Y and an energy target. But if there's no energy target we're going for, it was like, well, that's a lot of money. We shouldn't be spending that. So my sort of advice, or where I go, government, you have to understand the process that we go through. And I'm referring to the Ministry of Health and the capital investment. Infrastructure Ontario, I think, is getting there for sure. They have to set targets, and they have to be a champion. And I would argue that's what's lacking within the ministry right now, is finding that champion that aligns itself with Infrastructure Ontario, to government agencies and ministry, to deliver on what we need to do in the future. Last comment I'll make, they should have, like what we did, a report to set those targets and then go forward from there. And then that moves us forward as an industry.
As Alberta Health Services did 2 or 3 years ago, they've got a plan, they've got a target, they've got goals, they've got strategies. And Harry, if you're on the call, and Steve, great watching you guys executing that and seeing the progress you're making. Andrew, talk to us a bit about within the hospital accountabilities, KPIs, who should be responsible, and how do you measure that response to the responsibility?
So that's definitely a great question. But before I answer that question, just building on what Cliff was saying, I totally agree. As you said, Ian, Alberta set targets. It's time for Ontario to set some targets, because it makes this conversation so much easier if you can show the senior team that they have to align, that they can't value engineer something out that will stop you from being innovative and get to the numbers that Humber is at. Because we all know Humber put a lot of effort and work pre and post project to get to where they are, and it's not currently built the way the system is to put that effort in. It took Barb and Lori and the other members that were all champions to get there. So if it's not a seamless process, there will be flaws in what you get delivered. And we definitely want eventually project after project to deliver to those energy efficiencies, so that Ontario as a whole starts to develop a high standard for all projects. Once you get into the operational side of things, I definitely believe, now that I'm sitting here at the VP role, I guess I have to say the buck would stop with me, and then it's on me and the vice presidents out there that have redevelopment facilities and operational departments under them to make it a point at the senior level and influence setting that target. Cliff did it. We worked together. We always found money. As anybody who's been a part of Greening Health for a while, the North York General story of our time was that we continue to drop 5% for year after year after year, because we always had money available as long as the business case made sense. And we could live that story. We could have our CEO and our CFO come to Greening Health and tell you, because they understood what they wanted, and we understood what we needed to deliver to continue to get projects completed. So that was a unique for us situation, in that our target was very clear. We had a mandate, and we could then execute on that mandate and work together and collaboratively. So more of that, at that level. I hope I can replicate what Cliff set up in Framework in the Northwick General days. It's early days for me, so but again, great conversations with my current CEO, Scott Ovenden. He definitely wants to be involved. I just haven't yet had the opportunity to put tangible projects in front of him to test his mettle at that level, but it will come.
And we see Rudy at North York General continuing that tradition, going through, still providing great leadership, and North York General is still moving forward. So as you said, it can be done and can be done through generations. Colin, kind of closing thought here. Can you give us your favorite, I'm putting you on the spot here, I hadn't warned you about this. Can you give us a favorite story about something that really turned out well, surprisingly well, that taught you a lesson? Can you think of a nice story that we can leave people with to kind of reflect upon how well this can turn out?
Wow, you are putting me on the spot. So I think I might twist it a little bit, Ian, there. So I think because I was going to comment on, obviously we're a service provider. So and Cliff talked about, IO and the procurement model, and we're in conversations with IO on the energy matters. So obviously in a P3, when you're maintaining, there's incentives to improve efficiency in the hospital that you're running. There's conversation about how if they get in the way or if there's an easier way of doing that. And so I think we're trying to figure out, or IO is trying to figure out how to simplify that. And I think that's very important because we can't get in each other's way. We need to be a team. We need to be all driving towards the same goal of reduction in energy, reduction in or decarbonization. And the only way we're going to do that is if we get out of each other's way and remove the bottlenecks. And so I think that I'm going to speak in generalities here, but I think that we've had some really good conversations with some of our current clients where maybe the contract isn't advantageous for us to be incentivized to do those, but we're developing good partnerships on how do we get to a better place. I think, and this is going to be tooting greening healthcare, the measurement is the biggest deal for us. I think the seeing where our hospitals in comparison to more efficient hospitals could be makes a huge difference for us, for our site teams to say, yep, it's possible with the building that I have to get to a much more efficient place rather than just a sort of relaxed space of like, well, this is the hospital I was given, and so this is how it's going to run. So I think it's positive. I think that I can think of 3 facilities that we run now that we're going to see big changes in the next 12 to 18 months. So that's very positive to me, and I credit Greening Healthcare, but I also credit the knowledge across all of the organizations and sharing that knowledge. So
I think, Colin, that's the best answer to a different question, but it's a better question than I'd asked, and we'll come back to happy stories on a future panel. Conscious of time, at this point, if there are any, I won't ask for any other questions because, but if there are any Q&As now or over the next few minutes, we will undertake to bring them to the panel, and we'll respond both in writing, and we'll post the responses to Q&As up on the line. So again, I'd encourage everybody take advantage of this kind of experience and commitment that you have in this group right now, and ask the hard questions, especially if it gives you an answer you can use to bring the VPs in your organizations involved. I think, Andrew, I picked up on that one. The VP level things happen. Sorry, Colin. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, and I was reading the questions, and one of them was about, how do I pitch on a new development to get the vision aligned for the senior leaders? And I think it's really important. I mean, Cliff's done it, and Andrew's doing it, and to reach out within the network to help, sit in front of boards, sit in front of people who haven't completely bought in. I know within LS Dawn, we have a ton of people who would be more than happy to, at no cost to sit and try and sell the idea of like, this is the direction we need to go, and you need to set targets, and this is why. And I think the more we can share, so any facility that's looking for help with that, we'd be more than happy to help. And I'm sure there's others, that would be too, because we need to get, we're seeing the clinical staff and we're seeing executives switching to want to set targets, but there are still some holdouts that aren't quite there yet. And I think if you reach out for help, it'll save you time and energy for sure.
great closing thoughts, Colin. And as always, you know, we're just so grateful to our panelists, not just for today, but for the time they put in leading up to this, to rehearse as well as we can, knowing that these conversations go in all kinds of different but important directions. So if we were in person, we'd do a round of applause. But again, on behalf of everybody on this webinar, thank you all for sharing your insights. Let's step along to just the closing thoughts about where Greening Healthcare is going in 2023 and what you can expect if you're a Greening Healthcare member. And again, without any heavy pitch, every hospital that's not a member right now, if you consider joining, Michael's always happy to talk to you. There's power in numbers, there's power in networking. Our program, our events so far this year, the people will remember Dr. Cohn's, the reprise of his 2022 keynote and the Q&A. That recording is up on our website. There's the recording of the webinar on better LED lighting. If you're planning LED lighting conversion, you need to take a look at that as a very different approach to doing lighting retrofits. And the in-person workshop in the summer, that recording is also up now, where we look rolling up your sleeves, dirty fingernails. Let's look at what we can do with boiler plants and heat recovery wheels. Those things, if you haven't seen them, you need to refer to. We're today at July the 26th. Looking forward to October the 12th, when we'll be talking to the update on the now 19 new P3 hospitals in Ontario that we're reporting on an annual basis. Adding to that, we have reporting coming in from California, from Kaiser, from Alberta, from the UK. So we have a much broader representation there of what top performing new hospitals around the world look like. You can see the cohort projects we're involved with right now. This is hospitals and industry, and often Enbridge and the IESO working together to discover new knowledge. Happy to have people involved with this. And again, if this is the right idea at the right time, we welcome new hospital membership all the time. It just makes all of us stronger. In closing, you all know Michael. Amandeep is our Director of Engineering, who makes all of this analytical stuff and measures possible. And Climate Challenge Network, you can find our website at the address below. Please visit us, visit Greening Healthcare. And again, our thanks to the panelists. I hope everybody found this useful, but this is a call to action, and I hope everybody will leave this webinar saying, man, tomorrow we're going to start talking together and looking together at how we move this agenda forward, because time is not our friend. We're running out of it, and the planet is really angry with us. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.